Welcome, listeners, to the latest episode of Last Week with INDIAai. I'm Sindhuja, and I'm joined by my trusted colleague and friend Jibu. Together, we bring to you the latest news, analysis, and insights in the world of AI. Hi, Jibu. Welcome.
Hi, Sindhuja. Yes, good to be back. We are another week of our podcast, and the podcasts are becoming very popular. I'm getting very good feedback, and so we want to speak something different on this episode. I mean, we mostly focus on India-centric content. Of course, we are India AI, but it's good to have this wider perspective, right? What is happening and everything. For example, today in India AI, we have an excellent story written by Soumitra Dasgupta, the senior manager for content and communications at NASCOM. He's a veteran writer and one of our favorite writer.
Yes.
And I mean, you might have familiar with him from our Race 2020
Yeah.
coverage podcast, and he has written a beautiful story on the role of mental health in AI. And I love the way he opened the story. He says there are two distinct sides to how common people look at AI. On the one hand, we read these reports which emphasize, unlocking economic value of 15, 16, or even $17 trillion globally by 2030. And then on the other hand, there is ambiguity. So relate to that. I mean, I don't know if I falls into the category of common people, but this ambiguity that is generated by AI is often the main source of conversation whenever I come across someone new.
Yeah.
And that's why we want to address some of the bigger issues, right? What will be the dynamics of geopolitical balance going forward with as we enter this AI age,
Yeah.
as well as so many issues regarding it. Because I think last week I had a chance to do a webinar with the students of Amity University, Amity Business School in Bangalore. And the questions I repeatedly got were on similar tones and similar lines. Of course, we know we keep speaking about the economic disparity that can caused by AI. You speak about jobs being transformed or new jobs coming. But I feel one point before we get into the global scenario, one point I want to emphasize is we often overlook the wealth generation possibilities of AI technology. So rather than we are obsessed on jobs, what I mean by that is take someone like us, a middle class person. At least I am living in an emerging country, right? Do you want to trade your current comforts, benefits, everything to become a 17th century aristocrat living in Europe?
No. No, I'm also watching it right now. It's one of my binge shows. So I'm kind of trying to balance it off with another show that I just finished watching, which is The Wire. And just watching all that richness and all that grandeur and all that money, it just makes me feel like I cannot live that kind of life. I know it's not your opinion. Maybe not everyone would think that. Most people would want to have their own castle, but not me. So.
No. See, if you read more into how these castles were maintained, and public open defecation was one of the serious things. I want to get into that. It's nasty. And look at how things have transformed. Today, if we get a cut or chop on our body, you got antibiotics, right? You got tetanus shots. The way healthcare improved, vaccines, everything improved in the last 100 years. Whether from going to invention of penicillin to I mean, soon we will be having a COVID vaccine. I know we are going through this pandemic, but historically, our civilization has gone through much worse. The Black Plague. Here is the influenza of 1915. So here is the thing, right? That technology, the wealth it has created, the comfort it has created, right? And we often, and if you look back, many of the jobs, maybe a 17th century aristocrat, 4th to 17th century, come to 18th century or early 19th century, right? So the comforts we have, I mean, I can say something very, very simple, right? Imagine you are an aristocrat. Let me make you a queen in a European country,
That doesn't
of
sound too
your
bad.
choice. And imagine if you want to listen to a song, you need to go to the court, you need to get the musicians arranged, and what is the opportunity of hearing to good quality music?
Yeah.
How often you can? Now I can just I can just hear almost any song that's published in the world.
Yeah.
It's the vast, whether the weird Mongolian throat singing, from that to the Hungarian folk song. I can hear everything. So that's
Yeah.
one thing. The level of accessibility, the level of protection we get, the healthcare, the communication, and the connectivity, it is unparalleled in the history of the civilization. So that's what I keep pointing out, right? Yes, there will be job transformation, but it's not it shouldn't be looked at with this eyes of fear and confusion. It might be the idea of wealth generation should be the focus of conversation. Now that transforms into another area, right? This disparity in global wealth, right? I mean, we speak about AI adding 15 or 17 trillion to the economy. Now the question is, who is going to get that chunk, right? And right now we know, the big chunk is going to go to US and China. We also have opportunity. I mean, McKinsey has classified countries in one of their reports in 4 categories. With first is being, of course, only US and China, who are the leaders, and second you got the Canada, the UK, and Singapore, the who can benefit from this economic advantage. Third is where countries like India and Italy falls, the countries that require a lot of upskilling to benefit from this economic gain, right? Economic value, I would rather say. And then there's a fourth. Now we want to focus on that fourth. Who is this fourth? And that's where a big majority of the countries lies at this point. Yesterday I had a call with a gentleman called Jean Garcia Peric. So he founder and CEO of the organization called INDIAai Latin America. So he and his team has been trying to create what we are doing. INDIAai is doing in India. Creating a unified ecosystem in Latin America. And he was pointing out how do unprepared Latin America is for this AI impact, right? I mean, we look at Brazil, we look at the beautiful beaches of Rio, and of course Brazil is in the BRICS, and we say, wow, this is an awesome country. But if you look deep, it's a sad reality that in many of Latin American countries are way lagging behind, and the only good spot he was mentioning was Uruguay, which is a tiny country.
Yeah.
So there is this whole question, right, where these countries are gonna fall behind, what kind of imbalance on a global scenario they will create, and John has been pointing out this whole idea of digital colonialism. That's a possibility if these countries like China and US can use their advantage. And interestingly, if you read France's AI strategy paper, it says the whole strategy for France is not to become a colony of any of these two powers. So it's really weird, once a colonial state, colonial power, I will say, is now saying that, okay, our AI strategy is not to become a digital colony of either US or China. So this is the real scenario. What do you think? How is, this geopolitical imbalance, how is it going to affect?
It's interesting that you bring this perspective up, because I think one of the biggest narratives that has been really propagated right now is how technology is going to unify everybody and bring everyone together, and it's going to simplify the way we work. And I actually have some thoughts on the future of work, which I'll get into after this. But on the other hand, I think when you start looking at it from a country perspective, when you start looking at every singular country out there which is actually fortifying its technology reinforcements, its technology investments, then you can't help but imagine that this is going to be something that will be localized. It will be, it has to be localized, because one thing is the complexity of it. I think when it comes to solving specific problems at scale, like for instance urban planning, or when it comes to sanitation, or maybe when it comes to healthcare, these are kind of problems which you may not necessarily see across different geographies. I think in an earlier podcast, you and I had spoken about how, within North and South India itself, there is such a drastic difference in the kind of diseases that are being mapped. So if we're essentially looking at the use of AI in countries, in just one country like India, then, we need to have a very specific strategy. And that strategy may not necessarily apply to, say, even, say, in any other BRICS country, just because we're a part of a coalition, geopolitically. So I think what's going to happen is in a matter of time, the metric of trying to list countries based on their allegiances will change based on the kind of technology usage that they have. I think it'll finally boil down to countries which have a similar technology fabric that will find more common ground to really work with each other. Like for instance, when it comes to purposes of surveillance, and for the lack of a better example, I do see a little more commonality between, say, an India and a China. Right, because it is debatable as to who's really modeling who first, but right now it's pretty evident in terms of the kind of surveillance strategies and tactics that are being deployed either on civilians or even, say, for defense purposes. Another country that I see having common ground with us on that front is Israel. We are heavily borrowing from their elements of technology advancements to really sort of fortify our own strategies. So I think, geopolitically, there is going to be a whole other kind of unity that we can expect, and also a very different kind of a polarity also that we can see based on which countries can really work together and which ones cannot. But I don't think working in isolation is going to help. I've always believed that collaboration is going to be a great tool of our lives at the moment, as we know it professionally and personally. And I think AI is no different. But I think the dynamic and the kind of the kind of relationships that we're trying to build here will be based on how common our thread is when it comes to technology usage itself.
I think one point, people like John points out is, you mentioned China. So I was looking into the aspect of the whole US and China. Somebody calls this AI space race. Not a space race, but yeah, the next. It has so many similar elements from the Cold War space race. But now people like John is naming it as Cold War 2.0, and you can see whether it's the Huawei or the trade bans, the underlying technology has been, the underlying element has been AI, and it's not being publicly discussed, right? Both countries have an export ban on AI technologies to each other. And there is a whole situation. But it's interesting that people like, for example, Karen Howe of MIT Technology Review, she has been covering as a reporter on AI for many years now, and she was on a conversation with me yesterday. She was pointing out, so the whole idea of this Cold War 2.0 comes from the political entities of both China and US, rather, and we mentioned, how close the China is. So this closeness and this opaqueness of China is often limited or encompassed of the bureaucracy and the government part, because she was pointing out the Chinese researchers, right? They come outside the world, they present their papers, in international conferences, they publish their work on, the journals and things like that. And say, of course, I'm saying with the US. So this has, Sora pointed out in this article, there is a lot of ambiguity here. What is happening, how things are going to shift, and one thing that I'm really glad about it, how we as a country, what's the better word? Kind of guess this path, right? And we took actions earlier. I think that's the strategy we have seen from time to time, as a country. If you look, our atomic project was started like during Nehruvian day, right? And in a way, we are always has this habit of catching the wave. There are times where missed, but I'm considering the challenges we face as a country, and I feel we are also we are certainly not going to be a digital colony when it comes to AI. I'm certainly sure at the path in which we are going, at the innovation that's happening in this country, especially the brilliant work. It's not just limited to the labs and the universities now, right? You have like small children doing incredible work, like with the responsible AI for youth project. You have a school student who created an AI tool which can detect mental health, in a person.
The needle is changing. Definitely the needle is moving, because I think people are finally trying to, we've always been identified as a consumer first market, and I think we've established our dominance in that area, but now we need to really sort of move towards creating value. and creating long-term value, not just producing more consumers because there are just more people here. I think that's going to be a key differentiator, to make India really sort of like an AI superpower, if at all, in the years and decades to come.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, that's excellent point, Sadhuja. And we are also seeing transformation, right? We are becoming, we were always good in software, and now we are becoming our own hardware entry as well.
Yes.
We were manufacturing. But I mean, I think you did some coverage on the latest development from CDAC, isn't it?
In fact, this is a very big week for those who, weren't really paying attention. But, here I am happy to sort of give a bit of an update on that. But this week was when Param INDIAai, which is supposed to be India's largest and fastest supercomputer, managed to, sort of achieve another very, very important milestone. It's been ranked number 63 globally in the top 500 supercomputing list. So just to give our listeners a bit of an idea of what top 500 supercomputing is all about, it's basically a list of supercomputers that has been, put together based on inputs, from high-performance computer experts, computational scientists, manufacturers, and generally the internet community at large. So these are the people that get together and send their recommendations, and this list is released twice a year. So in this cohort that was just recently released, Param INDIAai has been ranked number 63. So not only have we broken into the top 500, India has also, for the first time, broken into the top 100 list of fastest computers in the world. So just to give you an idea of how fast it is, this is basically a machine with 210 AI petaflops. Its peak performance is 6.5 petaflops, and it's based on the NVIDIA DGX SuperPod reference architecture that comprises of 42 DGX A100 systems, and it's also connected with the Mellanox HDR InfiniBand, along with and it's also indigenously developed with software frameworks, cloud platforms that are provided by CDAC. So currently, this machine sits out of the Pune facility of CDAC, and they're supposed to be coming online anytime now, and they're expected to take on a scale of challenges essentially when it comes to, say, climate modeling, material modeling, healthcare, drug manufacturing, drug repurposing, so that drug manufacturing can be planned better. These are the kind of capabilities that a supercomputer can really deliver, and the hope is that it's the large data sets that we constantly keep talking about through all our stories. It's through supercomputers like Param INDIAai where we can actually use these large data sets for the greater good, and this supercomputer will be essentially made for the use for startups, for research, for academia, even for private players as well, who want to sort of harness AI for social good. So it's a huge milestone for India. It's a very, very big, moment of reckoning, really. And to just say that India has reached this particular level of proficiency, I don't know if many people know this, but the Param INDIAai, this particular system was actually built by one of CDAC's own scientists called Professor Abhishek Das. So I think we should all take a moment and sort of recognize how massive a milestone this is really for a country like India. And this is really exactly the whole narrative that really becomes stronger when it comes to making India a hardware hub. I mean, we've really sort of built a legacy from the 80s, late 80s, early 90s to now with respect to software. But one of the strong points, and I think this is one area where we can honestly really race ahead, or at least try to build our competency, is if we're able to build our hardware. Just to give you an example, I was talking to a co-founder yesterday, for one of our startups, the story you'll see next week. So this is a company that is essentially building sensors, or they were trying to basically build localized sensors because they want local data. And he told me, he's like, Sindhuja, I went all the way to China, and because one of the reasons is we only have a handful of PCB manufacturers in India. I think he mentioned the number as something to do with 40 or 50. I have to check my notes, but we don't have, say, more than 60 to 70 PCB manufacturers in the country, the size of India. Whereas if you go to China, he says you have a building filled with PCB manufacturers. You find that number of PCB manufacturers on a single floor. And there is an entire street that is dedicated to just finding these kinds of people who can help you build and source any and every kind of hardware that is necessary to, sync up your products and build your solutions. So this is the economies of scale that we need to really sort of work towards overcoming. edge computing is becoming the future. The big guys, the bigger players in this space like NVIDIA and Intel are propagating it. You have all the startups that are trying to build solutions which are trying to do edge computing, using AI. I believe we even did an article on this on INDIAai earlier this week, which I urge all the listeners to please go and read. But if edge computing has to become the reality in our country, then we need to really start with the basics, and that's where I think a hardware revolution is absolutely necessary.
So true, Sindhuja. Very absolutely, you pointed out the one of the biggest challenges, because when I was speaking to many people across the world, they point out the advantage the big tech has over any other entities. The Googles and the Googles and Microsoft and the Amazons, all those guys, is the hardware capability they have, and it reached to a point where many of the top minds in AI, like I can say Jan LeCun as an example, these guys end up working for these companies over universities, and the academic field, because it's not about money. Of course, there is a lot of money there, but it's all about how they can progress their vision, right? It's much easier to progress using these kind of hardware these companies have access to than the limited capabilities a university lab will have. And I think that's why this is a very huge milestone from national computing supercomputing mission and CDAC, and I'm hoping more of these will be coming in the next years down the line. And at the same time, we are seeing a whole new movement on the other side to limit the training resources, the data sets that AI programs require. So I think at some point
this is basically a very comprehensive way to become a very self-sustaining AI first nation. We have the talent on one side, we have the hardware on the other side, and we have the software capabilities, and we have the use cases and data sets. So what more do we need, right?
We were never short on talent, right? That's the thing about India, right? We were never short on talent. We always have brilliant minds. So that's that, and I think that's not. I mean, it's a near future. We can see a convergence point where this, the requirement and the computing power meets, and that will be going to be a very crucial for us as a country, as a will propel us to as an innovating country, and by the time I think we will be able to upskill a lot of our youngsters. I mean, if you haven't known, Future Skills have announced the Future Skills Prime, which is a skilling program, and there are so many incredible and easy to learn AI programs there. So the skilling part is something also the government as well as the industry is focusing on. Then you have the hardware, and of course we all have the talent is abundant in this country. So even though I felt really how do I say, a little bit disheartened speaking with Jean yesterday, but from an Indian perspective, we are on the right track.
Yeah, we're definitely on the right track. I think we're making all the right noises, and Rome wasn't built in a day. So it's going to take some time, and this is the kind of foundation that we have to lay, and it's going to take a while to build the right building blocks, which I think is happening. Like I said, I've always believed that collaboration is key, and I think I'm seeing that, when I was attending the press conference put together by the government and the private folks, I was seeing the synergy and the kind of language and the kind of, the same vibe, if I can say so, between the private players as well as the government players, to try and put aside whatever their differences of strategies may be, and try and understand that there is a bigger goal here, and they have to work together to try and make that big dream come true, because you really, like I said, cannot work in silos, you cannot work in isolation. So I think that's what's happening, which is very, very big, and I think it's something that's historic in terms of what India is doing. Never before would you really see this level of integration and collaboration happening between the private players, research, academia, government, entrepreneurs, all coming together for one big cause. At least I think tech has managed to do that, all things considered. I can't speak for other sectors for sure, but definitely technology has managed to achieve that for us. And I think it's great that we have a very forward-thinking sort of set of policymakers who want to sort of prioritize this at the very top. I think that's very important.
Yes, and speaking about making noise and building rooms, we are recording this podcast in a very unfavorable condition from my end. There is a lot of noise making and building rooms here. So my apologies for the any of the disturbances in the podcast that might have that my mics have caught up. So anyway, this was also always excellent talking to you. We will come with another interesting topic that will pique your curiosity and will be insightful and informative in the next week. So that's from us for this week.
Thanks again, Jigu, and thanks so much for your time and your very valuable insights today. I definitely learned a lot. You made me think very differently about what the whole the tech revolution is really doing in terms of our relationships between countries these days. That's all the time we have today, folks. We'll be back next week with another round of very exciting stories, views, and opinions on shaping the AI narrative for India. You can follow all the updates on INDIAai on our LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram channels. Until then, stay safe, stay connected.